right around there. Now, Dallas, you're going to have to be careful.
An exciting moment from Alien, the outer space horror film that is setting box office records all across the United States. Alien, which I gotta admit scared me.
I gotta admit it scared me too.
Oh, all right. Now, the other guy who said he's scared is Roger Ebert, the film critic for the Chicago Sun-Times.
My fellow chicken on today's program is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. Two of the most successful genres of the last 5 years have been science fiction and horror films, and Alien is both. It's a combination of some of the best space hardware since Star Wars, and the most gruesome bug-eyed monster since the creature from the Black Lagoon. The movie begins aboard a gigantic intergalactic freighter where the crew is in suspended animation until the onboard computer awakens them for an emergency. The captain explains why their mission has been changed.
Well, some of you may have figured out we're not home yet. We're only halfway there.
What?
Mother's interrupted the course of our journey.
Why?
Yeah. She's programmed to do that should certain conditions arise. They have.
Like what?
Seems she has intercepted a transmission of unknown origin. She got us up to check it out.
A transmission? Out here?
Yeah.
What kind of a transmission?
Acoustical beacon that repeats at intervals of 12 seconds.
SOS?
I don't know.
Human?
Unknown.
So what? We are obligated under section.
I hate to bring this up, but this is a commercial ship, not a rescue ship.
Right.
It's not my contract to do this kind of duty. And what about the money? If you want to give me some money to do, I'd be happy to, oblige.
That's right.
Let's go over the bonus situation. We never
Can we
let's talk about the bonus situation.
Sorry, can I say something?
Let's talk about the bonus situation.
There is a clause in the contract which specifically states any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
I don't want to hear it.
We don't know that's intelligent.
I want to go home and party.
Parker, will you just listen to the man?
On penalty of total forfeiture of shares. Money.
You got that?
Yeah.
All right, we're going in.
Yeah.
I think Star Wars kind of pioneered that idea that a spaceship, instead of being all kind of perfect and sterile like the one in 2001, would look more like a gut bucket, like that kind of a tramp freighter, and there's the crew on board. The beacon signal comes from a nearby unexplored planet anyway, and so space regulations require them to land, and they do in one of the movie's really most inspired scenes. They explore a terrifying planetary landscape, they discover an ancient alien spaceship, and they work themselves into a very tight spot while their discoveries are monitored by television back on board.
Ash, can you see this?
Yes, I can. I've never seen anything like it.
You get a wonderful sense there of something that might have been waiting there a long time for somebody to find it. Anyway, they go on board that mysterious ship, and they wind up bringing back an extremely unwelcome guest on board their own ship, an alien creature that's the movie's most original invention. Now, I don't want to give away too much. I'm not giving away too much when I say it's kind of a cross between a squid and a spider and the Thing, and it's not real great to look at because its body is covered with extraterrestrial intestines, and the humans battle for survival. The alien oozes around the ship like a mucous membrane from outer space, and the movie is one of the scariest old-fashioned space operas I can remember.
Well, it did scare me, too. I looked away, and I was yelling with, like, a few other people. It's going to hit them on the floor. It's going to come from the ceiling.
It's in the next row. It's behind me in the theater. Right.
But I want to say that, you know, strip away all the beautiful scenery and the evocative weirdness of the picture. What we really have here is basically the haunted house film, only instead of a wild creature running around in a haunted house, we got a wild creature running around in a spaceship. And so this is not the greatest science fiction film ever made, even though it seems to be doing very well across the country.
Well, I think the combination of horror and science fiction is a very appealing one right now, very commercial. There is one moment, though, when the film does transcend just that horror, haunted spaceship sort of thing. And that's in this scene we just saw. As it goes on a little bit further, they enter that spaceship, they go inside, they find the alien pilot all desiccated from his voyage that might have taken place millions of years ago, and then they go into that big, enormous cavern down below and what they find there and so forth. Gives you a real sense, I mean, from the point of view of art direction and everything else, that this could have been an alien ship. It's not just another TV or movie creation.
Yeah, one consumer point. A lot of young people are probably going to want to see this picture. They love horror films. This one's pretty bloody. It is pretty violent, and I think a lot of people, adults and kids, are going to be turned off and maybe frightened too much by it. So for young kids, certainly, this is not a picture to go see.
It's R-rated.
Yeah, for a reason.
Yeah, there's a reason for it.
Okay.
But then after those two films in '77, things did not necessarily go on to get any better. Last year, for example, we got a whole lot of strictly routine science fiction movies that looked fancy and had big budgets, but that really didn't have any more imagination than the old tried and true space operas of the 1950s. One of them was Alien, which was basically just an intergalactic haunted house thriller set inside a spaceship. Early in the film, though, there was one scene with real imagination as the space travelers from Earth explored an alien planet. Another entry in the big-budget outer space sweepstakes was Star Trek, and its gimmick was simply to reunite all the old stars from the TV series.
Spock.
And Walt Disney made its big-budget space opera called The Black Hole. The characters were dull, the plot was hackneyed and boring, and the black hole, get this, was blue. You know, we heard so much about the special effects that Walt Disney put into the black hole, and if you look at that, the black hole, which you can see moving, which I think is doesn't go along with any law of physics I've ever heard about, it looks like an intergalactic bathtub drain. And all three of those movies are real disappointments, coming after Star Wars and Close Encounters, and coming after the landmark film of 2001. And it seems to me that those three films, 2001, Close Encounters, and Star Wars, have really changed the rules of the game, because before that and back in the 50s, you could have movies that were essentially schlock, and you could go to them and you could enjoy them, and even now we enjoy them on Creature Features on The Late Show. But now it seems to me the ante has been upped, and you've got to have a movie that gives you a great deal more, both in special effects and in imagination, or we're just going to be disappointed as we were by last year's crop of science fiction.
You talk about those films in that cheap bathtub in the sky. I think that all these films are intellectually empty as well. I mean, I got to come back to 2001 and that spirit, that drive, the beautiful musical notes in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. How can you not watch that and want it to be true, to feel that it might be true, and then you compare, what has Black Hole got going on in it? There's not a brain in Black Hole except the idea, let's make some money because we know these little kids want to go see Star Wars, so we will make another special effects film, and maybe these kids will come out and see it. They'll be trapped in it, and before they know it, maybe they'll settle for this. I am not optimistic about the science fiction films in the future, because I think it takes men of great vision, and they're in short supply.
You know, the science fiction fans for the last 30 years have been using a phrase called the sense of wonder to describe what they find when they find a science fiction movie or novel that really moves them. That sense of awe when you're exposed to some kind of great idea, like an intelligence somewhere else in the universe, or an idea in terms of the imagination of a science fiction plot. 2001 had it. Star Wars, in its own corny, silly way, had it. Close Encounters certainly had it, and unless we have that sense of wonder, it doesn't really matter, I guess, how many other kinds of special effects you throw into the fray.
Do you like our owl?
It's artificial?
Of course it is.
Must be expensive.
Very. I'm Rachel.
Deckard.
Harrison Ford as a futuristic policeman out to capture a robot in Blade Runner.
Our next film is Blade Runner, a big-budget science fiction fantasy. It's also ambitious. It creates a futuristic Los Angeles in the year 2020 as the setting for a story about cops and robots. Harrison Ford stars as the cop, His assignment is to track down a group of replicants who have escaped from off-world. They're hiding out in Los Angeles. Well, what is a replicant? It's an android or artificial man or woman that looks and sounds absolutely realistic, but isn't. In the world of the future, replicants are slaves, forbidden to visit Earth, and when they come to Los Angeles, the cops go looking for them. In this scene, Harrison Ford begins to suspect that the woman he's attracted to may be more or less than human.
I drop music. You play beautifully. Say, kiss me.
Kiss me.
I want you.
I want you.
Okay.
I want you.
That's an actress named Sean Young as the woman who may or may not be a replicant. This movie goes, what do you mean may or may not? Well, I don't want to, you guessed it?
No kidding.
Okay, fine. This movie goes through some pretty predictable paces about their forbidden love, but I was never really very interested in the characters in Blade Runner. I didn't find it convincing. Instead, what impressed me in this film were the special effects, the wonderful use of optical trickery to show me a gigantic imaginary Los Angeles, which in the vision of this movie has been turned into sort of a futuristic Tokyo. Here's a scene where Harrison Ford zips over the streets of L.A. in a squad car of the future.
The charmer's name was Gaff. I'd seen him around. Brian must have upped him to the Blade Runner unit. That gibberish he talked was city speak, gutter talk, a mishmash of Japanese, Spanish, German, what have you. I didn't really need a translator. I knew the lingo every good cop did. But I wasn't going to make it easier for him.
Threshold.
The special effects there were designed by a team led by Douglas Trumbull, who created the visuals for 2001 and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He doesn't stop with flying squad cars and towering skyscrapers. He imagines all the details of life in the year 2020, right down to what the noodles will look like in a Japanese restaurant. They look just like noodles do today.
Yeah, creative, yeah.
About halfway through Blade Runner, I realized I stopped caring about the people in the movie. I was interested mostly in the special effects. It's a great movie to look at, but a hard one to care about. I didn't appreciate the predictable story, the standard characters, the cliffhanging cliches, but I do think the special effects make Blade Runner worth going to see.
I agree with part of your review. Predictable, cliches.
What about the special effects?
Dazzling for the first 20 minutes, and then what? I mean, this story goes no place as far as I'm concerned. I invested a lot of energy in this movie watching it because it was so striking looking. And Harrison Ford is an attractive actor, and he does take us through any adventure that he's in. But I'm sitting there halfway through the picture saying, where is this going? And when it's over, I think I've wasted my time. I admire the special effects, but Roger, there are a lot of people in this country and in England who can do this quality of special effects, so I don't
There are not a lot of people who can do this
a handful.
quality.
What I'm saying is that
5 or 6.
they in and of themselves, that in and of themselves doesn't make it a film worth going to see.
I'm trying to give Blade Runner a pretty specific review. I didn't believe in the story. I didn't care about the characters. On the other hand, to look at the film, the set decoration, the design, the visual conception of this Los Angeles didn't get tired for me in 20 minutes. I felt as if I were being shown a world I hadn't seen before.
It was done by Ridley Scott, who made a similarly attractive-looking film, an Alien, but at least they had a conventional pull you through the picture story there, a horror film. This film, I think, is a waste of time. Pretty to look at, but a waste of time.
When we come back, Blade Runner has been re-edited by its director, and we'll review the new version. Released in 1982, and since then its vision of a 21st century Los Angeles has become one of the most familiar images of recent movies. But now we learn that the original theatrical version of Blade Runner did not quite match the vision of director Ridley Scott, who has now re-edited the film. His director's cut will play in theaters before going to home video, where once again viewers will be able to see cop Harrison Ford on the trail of genetically altered humanoids known as replicants. Here he visits the headquarters of an evil mega corporation, where he's greeted by Sean Young.
Do you like our owl?
It's artificial?
Of course it is.
Must be expensive.
Very. I'm Rachel.
Deckard.
Rutger Hauer co-stars here in his first big Hollywood role as the leader of a band of rebel replicants. And of course, in a city with incredibly tall buildings, there has to be a duel on the roof of one of them.
That was irrational of you. Not to mention unsportsmanlike. Where are you going?
So, okay, what's new in this version of Blade Runner? Well, it's more a case of what Scott left out than what he put in. The earlier version had a spoken narration by Harrison Ford, which was included because the studio was afraid the public wouldn't understand the movie. That narration is gone, and the movie now ends on a more existential note with dialogue of sad irony rather than with a more conventional action climax. But this version has the same basic strengths and weaknesses of the 1982 release. It's an amazingly strong film on the visual level, but I wish they'd done more with the strange predicaments of the replicants, who are human in every sense except one, which is that somebody else says they're not.
Yeah, I thought he had improved it with this version, and I think taking out the narration helps. I think shortening the film, because I think it plays out at a very leisurely pace, we'll put it that way, charitably. I had an interesting reaction to it, which is why I enjoyed it, which was seeing these actors years later now and looking back at them and looking and studying their faces and the aging process. Sean Young was fascinating to see.
Yes,
I think you know, we've talked about this.
She's a very interesting
actress. She's a very good
actress,
actress, and you can see it here with not a lot of dialogue, and she's done very, very well. Seeing Rutger Hauer, younger then, Harrison Ford, who has this fabulous ability to, with no dialogue, to make you care that what he's thinking about. It's a nice document, and also one more thing. I know Blade Runner's been real big in video stores. We saw it in a movie theater now, and that's the way to see pictures. I mean, it wasn't
but
a
of course,
pleasure.
I saw the original version not long ago on Laserdisc, and there are, you know, I question you. I don't know how long it's been since you've seen it,
been a
but
while.
The narration doesn't hurt the film at all. In fact, Harrison Ford has such an interesting voice that it helps, I think, to establish some tone and atmosphere. It doesn't hurt a bit. I think that basically it's a wash. It's just another version of more or less the same material, and you can look at it again and see if you like it better or not.
The first movie is named Legend, and it tells the story of a battle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, and a struggle for the control of the magical unicorns who hold the key to this ancient conflict. It is about a brave, handsome young hero and a plucky, beautiful young heroine, and about an evil monster who lives in the fires below and schemes to destroy both of them. In other words, this is one more high-tech, prehistoric teenage special effects movie. Here's a scene where the two young lovers, played by Tom Cruise and Mia Sara, glimpse one of the rare unicorns in a forest clearing.
You spook the beast and spoil the trap. This shot be just as sweet as pie.
The young girl looks innocent there, but before long she's lured into the underworld and seduced into becoming an evil priestess. Tom Cruise ventures into the cavern of darkness to rescue his girlfriend and is locked in a battle to the death with one of the evil warriors. I'm struck once again watching those scenes as to how good this movie looks and how interesting it's not. This is the kind of movie that either you get into it right away or you don't get into it at all, and I didn't. Legend has all of its parts in the right places, and the special effects look great, and Tim Curry from Rocky Horror Picture Show does a terrific job of playing the Prince of Darkness, but the movie lacks a certain lightness of touch. It's like a lot of other recent dreary sword and sorcery epics, all filled with dark shadows and pretentious declarations of doom and gloomy symbolism. A movie like this needs, what it really needs is a little of the cheerful Errol Flynn-style swashbuckling spirit of adventure from the old days of Hollywood. It takes itself too seriously and winds up getting lost in its own pretension.
Gee, I wouldn't even throw any of the compliments you threw at it. I didn't think that Tim Curry to me looked like he'd come off that deviled ham little thing, that Underwood deviled ham package, and they just, dressed him up in the red stuff. The girl, they're using her for a music video, I suppose. Tom Cruise, one of my favorite young actors from Risky Business. What is he doing in a picture like this except cashing a big paycheck? I hope this is the last one he does. This genre has been beaten to death. To me, Roger, I thought what you were going to say at the end of that last clip is, doesn't it all look the same? Doesn't it all blend together? Haven't we seen 20 hours of molten lava and rocks and creatures and all this stuff? It bores me to tears. They've lost it. There's no excitement. The first time, maybe, this is dead meat.
Yeah, well, that's my whole point. The first time, maybe, this would have seemed better to you because it is a good-looking movie. It's directed by Ridley Scott, the man who made Alien, and it does have, you've got to admit, it has a level of technical competence to it. They've put a lot of interesting work into what's on the screen. Roger, they just haven't made it into a story that anybody wants to watch,
Roger,
or that anybody would ever care about.
You know what that is? To me, that's just money. Give somebody $15 million or whatever this picture costs, and anybody can do that.
Yeah,
there's no achievement.
They gave $15 million to the folks who may return to Oz, and they didn't do this well. Coming up next, how angry do you have to get in order to want to kill your father?
For Sato. I can't help you.
How do I get to him?
Let the police handle it.
Michael Douglas is a New York cop trying to find an escaped prisoner in Japan in Black Rain.
Our first film is the highly touted Black Rain by Ridley Scott, the maker of Alien and Blade Runner. Like those pictures, Black Rain is good looking, but there's not much else to recommend it. Michael Douglas plays a tough New York City detective. How tough? He drag races a punk on a motorcycle as the movie begins. The rest of the film is about a sophisticated. The next thing that happens is that Douglas and his partner witness a Japanese mobster threaten a rival doing business with an American mafioso. That's Andy Garcia as Douglas's partner. They wind up tracking that killer named Sato in his native Japan, and they're forced to work with a Japanese detective partner whom Douglas doesn't respect. at first.
You're a foreigner. This isn't New York. We have rules here.
You have rules, huh? Hey, look, pal, I see Sato's work, okay? He ain't following your program.
Black Rain pays only lip service to the Japanese culture in the most obvious stereotypical ways, as Douglas, on the case, gets a lesson in how to use chopsticks.
Yeah. Doma arigato.
Big shot from New York, huh?
The last act of the film is the predictable extended chase in colorful Japanese urban settings. Black Rain has a good villain, but I think the script makes a fundamental mistake. The Michael Douglas character is presented as very much in control most of the time he's in Japan, and I think the whole picture would have been so much better if he had been totally at sea, constantly being fooled along with us in the audience. Why should he understand how? He's a run-of-the-mill New York detective. He's not the big all-star, okay? Why would he know how detective work is done in Japan? How would he know how Japanese criminals work, especially on their own turf? It doesn't make any sense. Instead, he is played as the traditional macho hero, and that kind of cultural imperialism, I think, really undoes the movie.
I was also very disappointed in this movie. One of the things I kept thinking of as I looked at it was Blade Runner, the earlier movie by Ridley Scott, which used enormously effective settings in urban Los Angeles of the future, making that into a very depressing, kind of overwhelming city, kind of the Gotham City of Los Angeles, if you will. They're doing the same thing here, but to no purpose. And what happens is the city, Osaka, the sets for the city, overwhelm the action. There was so much visually going on that has nothing to do with the story that you're almost distracted. And then in the middle of it, this really dumb, simple story. I mean, it's not a very good plot. And you didn't mention Kate Capshaw, who was the bartender in the mob hangout.
Because she's an important...
Now, this could have been a cliche of one sort, where they have the geisha who falls in love with the American cop and gives him all the secrets. Instead, it's an American girl who's been there 8 years and presumably knows every single secret of the Japanese mafia, which she doles out to Michael Douglas one at a time. I somehow doubt if an American girl could find out everything about the Japanese yakuza, as they call themselves, even in 8 years, even as a bartender.
Well, if she knew it all, why would she give it to him? That's the point.
That's a good point.
The whole thing is, this movie is made like an American film, and they just... I think it's almost insulting. The portrayal of the Japanese in the film, which could have been exciting and fresh to us, is just standard stuff updated from stereotypes of the 40s.
Terrifically good-looking productions to cover up a very, 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 very thin script. Okay, next movie.
Here, take this map. I need you to find all the secondary roads to Mexico from Oklahoma City. I think we should stay off the interstate. We're too conspicuous.
Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis star in a rare woman's road picture. Two women for a change finding themselves as they cross the country in Thelma and Louise.
Our first movie is named Thelma and Louise, and this is a road movie and a buddy movie, but it is not just a tired recycling of those familiar themes. This movie is bold, fresh, and original. It tells the story of a couple of women who are best friends and who are trapped in unsatisfying lifestyles and decide to get away just for a weekend to have a little fun. The movie stars Gina Davis as Thelma, a housewife whose husband is a complete pain in the neck to live with. Susan Sarandon is her best pal, Louise, who works as a waitress.
Hey, how you doing, little housewife? You all packed? We're out of here tonight. Well, wait now. I still have to ask Daryl if I can go. You mean you haven't asked him yet? Thelma, for Christ's sake. Is he your husband or your father?
Once they're off on their own, they stop in a bar for a few drinks, and Thelma begins to glow with her newfound freedom.
You said Jimmy was going to get out of town and for once just really let our hair down? Well, darling, look out, because my hair is coming down.
But then tragedy strikes when a drunk tries to rape Thelma in the parking lot and unexpectedly winds up dead. Suddenly, these two fun women start thinking of themselves as fugitives from the law. They're on the run.
Look, Thelma, you just got to stop talking to people. You got to stop being so open. We're fugitives now. Right? Let's start behaving like that.
You're right.
Thank you.
A man was shot. And we have some witnesses that saw a 1966 T-Bird convertible leaving the scene.
That is Harvey Keitel, as a cop who understands what these women are up against and would like to help them before their troubles snowball.
but the two women are afraid to turn themselves in, and they drift into an outlaw culture.
Well, now, I've always believed that done properly, armed robbery doesn't have to be a totally unpleasant experience.
The movie turns into a chase.
Thelma, you know how I feel about Texas. We're not going that way.
Yeah, I know, Louise, but we're running for our lives. I mean, can't you make an exception? I mean, look at this map. The only thing between Oklahoma and Mexico is Texas. Look.
I really got into this movie and into the characters of those two women who are played with great energy and humor and conviction by Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis. Thelma and Louise may sound like a formula movie about rebels on the run, but it's not formula because the acting, writing, and directing are all looking for the truth and the irony in this situation. The movie was directed by Ridley Scott, who made Alien and Blade Runner, and written by Kali Khoury. They've created two of the best characters of the year, and I only have one complaint about this movie. It's a very specific one. The crucial last shot of the whole film is handled all wrong and steals the catharsis away from the audience. It's a freeze frame, and Scott doesn't allow enough time for it to sink in before he starts the busy end credits and the music and flashbacks of the two women. He upstages his own punchline, and I like this movie so much that that really made me mad.
Well, I didn't like the back end of the picture when they get involved in the outlaw world that you talk about at the end. That's when I felt that the picture did get a little bit formula with an action scene. And the other thing is that I happen to think that Susan Sarandon's character and her performance is a whole lot more interesting than Gina Davis.
Oh, I don't think so.
Well, that's the way the picture split for me. So in those two ways, I think the picture is a little more formula than you're giving it credit for.
Well, I think Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon both played very plausible, original characters. I could believe that these women existed, that they were friends, and that they developed the way that the movie shows them.
For me, Gina Davis is a little bit of the kooky character that we associate her playing with all the time, and Sarandon seemed just a little bit more not so flashy.
So you liked the movie or you didn't like the movie?
I like parts of the movie. I'm going down, reluctantly.
You're going down.
Because I felt that that's the direction of the picture. Okay, our next film is called Hanging with the Homeboys.
So, for me, Thelma and Louise is a real good movie.
I actually, of the four pictures, I think Hanging with the Homeboys has the most energy and fun in it.
You always jump around a little bit on this annual show, and I'm going to start, for some reason, with number 9 on my list, which is Thelma and Louise. This was a road movie about two women, good friends, played by Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis, who started out for a weekend of harmless fun and ended up making a tragic series of big mistakes. After Sarandon has committed a murder, more or less by accident, they find themselves the subject of a national manhunt.
Look, Thelma, you just got to stop talking to people. You got to stop being so open.
At one level, I suppose that Thelma and Louise is really a fable, a sort of Bonnie and Clyde story about tragic heroines captured by their own legend. But on another level, it's about friendship and about two women who find themselves and realize their potential and their dreams during a few days of freedom after a lifetime of knuckling under to men. Sarandon and Davis were wonderful in this movie, and the direction by Ridley Scott showed us an American West that was somehow new and not just a series of familiar, recycled visual cliches.
You know, when the picture came out, I didn't like it. I had to see it again because so many people did. And I still didn't like it, except for the scene involving the truck driver that's harassing them. That is played very well, really played to the audience. There was just too many times when I thought, this isn't the way it's going to happen, and I saw it as a contrived movie. And in addition, I thought Sarandon did a lot better job with the southern accent than David.
Well, I'll grant you it's not going to be the way it would happen in real life, but I like the contrivances very much.
Okay.
As Columbus. 1492, Conquest of Paradise.
Climb. Come on, we'll do it together.
I can't. You climb, damn it!
A skipper played by Jeff Bridges forces one of his young crew members to overcome vertigo and climb the rigging in that scene from White Squall, an adventure movie that begins in 1960 when a class of high school students signs aboard a sailing school ship for a year-long voyage. There are adventures along the way, including a tricky moment when they're threatened by a Cuban naval patrol. This is just before the time of the Bay of Pigs invasion.
They think we're carrying Cuban refugees, Skipper. I don't think they're going to take it very lightly that I'm a Cuban national.
Nothing's going to happen.
Calamity strikes toward the end of the voyage when a dreaded white squall suddenly appears.
during the storm lead to a Coast Guard inquiry, which plays a lot like courtroom scenes in general, and the end of the movie Scent of a Woman in particular.
You really felt that your crew was up to the conditions?
We had come 12,000 miles together through every kind of seas imaginable.
Except a white squall.
White Squall is a big, energetic, good-looking picture directed with a lot of energy by Ridley Scott, and I like the elements that deal with sailing. But the human story was less impressive. Much is made of Bridges' desire to shape these kids, but his philosophy doesn't seem to go any deeper than obeying discipline and sticking together. I'm recommending the movie, but for the sensational photography and the very effective storm sequence, not for the thin story.
Have the courage. Have the courage to knock this picture.
Have the courage to admit that you like the storm sequence at least.
Who cares?
You did? You like it or not? Pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah, and, you know, and the boats were great too.
Yeah, okay, so isn't that part of the whole visceral experience of going to a movie?
No, Roger. That isn't what this movie is about. This movie spends umpteen amounts of time, just by comparison, to the story of these individual kids. And each kid gets its formula, and you know it. Each kid gets his turn in the barrel. One kills the dolphin. One can't climb the mast. Another one has problems with his parents. All this sort of stuff. I mean, give me a break. It's just like it's a shooting gallery of kids.
I give you that.
I know you
said it in my review. I'm saying I give the movie a marginal recommendation.
So the boats are beautiful.
Well, wait a minute. Now that diminishes it. The boats are beautiful. The scenery is beautiful. The storm sequences are beautiful. The way the ship sails.
Well,
and actually Jeff Bridges' performance.
And it is
all of that is very good.
Yeah, and a character that you don't think is fully written in terms of his advice and ministering to these kids. It was, you said so yourself. If it were a documentary about boats, Roger, I might give it a thumbs up too. It isn't.
2 thumbs up for G.I. Jane and for Demi Moore's gutsy performance as a woman surviving Navy SEAL training. The film opens next Friday. Oscar nominee Russell Crowe shares the Roman Coliseum with savage beasts in that scene from Gladiator. And this one is a real disappointment, a movie that's been photographed in such a dark, dingy, and drab visual style that the energy just drains out of every shot. At the beginning of the film, you want to see some excitement. At the end, you want to see some daylight. As the movie opens, Russell Crowe plays the victorious General Maximus, who's chosen by Emperor Marcus Aurelius, played by Richard Harris, to end corruption in Rome. It's quite an honor, but the Emperor's son, Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix, gnashes his teeth with jealousy.
Our powers will pass to Maximus, to hold in trust until the Senate is ready to rule once more. Rome is to be a republic again.
Maximus is left for dead by a vengeful Commodus and is later made a slave and transported to Africa, where he comes under the power of Proximo, a manager of gladiators, who was played by the late Oliver Reed, who died during the filming of this picture.
Win the crowd, and you'll win your freedom. I will win the crowd. I will give them something they've never seen before.
Gladiating is Maximus's ticket back to Rome, where the Colosseum is run like a Roman version of professional wrestling.
Caesar is proud to give you alias
Maximus becomes the all-vanquishing hero, and that leads to a showdown with the insecure Commodus.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix legions. Loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius.
Even though Gladiator was directed by Ridley Scott, who's famous for his special effects, the film has a murky look, and the Colosseum, partially created by computer animation, looks especially unconvincing. The actors do what they can, but the dialogue undermines them, and sometimes the parallels with the World Wrestling Federation seem almost deliberate, as when a tribune announces, "Caesar is happy to present the only undefeated champion in Roman history, the legendary Titus." Give me a break. One other thing, Gladiator thinks that when the Romans wanted somebody to live, they signaled with thumbs up. Actually, live was signaled by a thumb inside the fist. An extended thumb in any direction meant death. But nobody in this movie knows this, and that's good.
for Maximus.
You know, who cares? I don't think it matters. It's hard to even know where to begin here. I thought this was one of the best movies I've ever seen. I thought this was one of the best movies of the year.
Ever seen?
And you make this film
Of the
sound
year?
of the year easily. You make it sound frivolous. There's nothing frivolous about this movie.
This doesn't have any depth.
This
It doesn't have any
film
juice.
is eloquent. The story grabs you from the
come on.
beginning. It is visualized in a way that Ridley Scott is known for, where he reinvented the future in Blade Runner. He gives us an authentic, fresh take on the past here. It is not murky, and wherever it is murky, it serves the battle sequences.
It is very,
Russell
very
Crowe, an actor of tremendous, charismatic, towering power. He has a kind of intensity and eloquence that we haven't seen, I think, since Richard Burton, and he also reminds me of Anthony Hopkins. And the characters here, Joaquin Phoenix, Commodus, the complexity of this character. The man is a monster. He's the monster he knows that his father's going to become.
It's my turn.
But
Commodus
we feel
is
sympathy for
absolutely
him.
transparent compared to somebody like Nero in Quo Vadis, played by Peter Ustinov.
My heart broke for him. This film succeeds in every way, on every level, and I have to say I'm shocked at what you have to say about it.
Absolutely doesn't. Did you see Titus?
Yes, I saw Titus.
Shames this movie. Let me talk. Titus shames this movie. It shames it. It shames it in the look, in the drama, in the characterizations, in the performances, in the depth. This movie is basically just a Gladiator movie.
Titus and her work, as a matter of fact. It's a very unique vision, but it certainly wasn't as dramatically compelling as this. And the characters didn't have this kind of complexity. And the language here, you cannot make fun of the language. It was extraordinarily compelling.
I actually
Within the
prefer
first
Shakespeare's language.
5 minutes, I was writing things down because it was
you've got to make fun.
This is no Technicolor toga party held on some Hollywood back lot. This is a fine
We have a major
filmmaking.
disappointment and
We have a major disagreement here. We certainly do.
Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this week's show, and boy, did we have some disagreements. A big one on Gladiator. Joyce thinks it's one of the best movies she's ever seen. I thought it was shallow and murky.
And to get back to Gladiator, I'll see at Oscar time. I'm predicting Oscar nominations for Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, I'm sure it'll win 8 or 10 Oscar nominations, but that doesn't mean anything.
They will be deserved.
We have to have a higher standard
They
than
will
the
be
Academy.
deserved. My standards are right here.
Okay.
I'm giving very serious thought to eating your wife.
The most famous serial killer in movie history is lusting for fresh blood in Hannibal.
Anthony Hopkins is back as Dr. Hannibal Lecter in the long-awaited sequel to The Silence of the Lambs, the Academy Award-winning picture that also resulted in Oscars for Hopkins and Jodie Foster. Fresh from Gladiator, director Ridley Scott fills the screen with beautifully haunting and stunning images that give the movie an operatic feel. This time, Julianne Moore slips on Clarice Starling's shoulder holster and finds herself on the doctor's trail. Here she meets with an ex-orderly from the mental asylum where she met Lecter all those years ago.
Did you ever think, after he escaped, he might come after you?
No. He once told me that whenever feasible, he preferred to eat the rude. Free-range rude, he called them.
That's Frankie Faison as Barney. Even though Lecter is so infamous that Hannibal-related items are selling for big bucks on eBay, he's been able to carve out a new identity in Florence as a scholar named Dr. Fell. The great Giancarlo Giannini plays Pazzi, a local detective who thinks he's hunting Lecter when in fact it's the other way around.
It's your ancestor, Commendatore, hanging beneath these very windows.
Starling knows Patsy is skirting the law to nab Lecter for the reward money, and she calls him to let him know she's onto him.
Someday you'll thank me, or you won't. I don't care. He'll be alive. Inspector Pazzi?
Is this Clarice? Oh, hello, Clarice. I'm afraid I have bad news for you.
Is he dead?
We're deep into the story before that first conversation between Hannibal and Clarice, but even when they finally tango in person, there's a surprising lack of tension or erotic undercurrent. And although Julianne Moore is a fine actress, she's not Jodie Foster, who was so indelible as Clarice. This isn't like a James Bond picture where we can make that leap of faith to another performer. But even if The Silence of the Lambs were erased from my memory, I still wouldn't recommend Hannibal. It's more of a gore fest than a psychological thriller, and the decision to show the cannibalism in graphic detail, I think, is a huge mistake. Instead of being terrifying, Hannibal is just disgusting.
You know, you make a good point. I suppose that if the sight of a man cutting off his own face and feeding it to his dogs who are seen eating it doesn't get the NC-17 for violence, then the MPAA is just never going to give that rating again.
Not to mention the fact that we see a human throbbing brain at some point with a guy's head screwed off.
And it's a little bit of it is sauteed and fed to him for his lunch. You know, I had another problem with Hannibal in addition to the ones you've mentioned. For me, the essential appeal of Hannibal Lecter was that his mind roamed widely while his body was imprisoned. I'll never forget that first shot of him in The Silence of the Lambs. Clarice descends 7 flights of stairs and goes through 7 locked doors before we finally see him for the first time behind that unbreakable plexiglass wall.
That is the Duomo scene from the Belvedere. Do you know, Florence?
All that detail just from memory, sir?
Memory, Agent Starling, is what I have instead of a view.
But now, in Hannibal, here he is in a Washington train station, riding on a merry-go-round, and instead of being the embodiment of caged malevolence, he's been reduced to a more conventional movie predator.
Clarice, you were very, very warm. You were so close.
In the first movie, he had to use his intelligence to try to control his world and to try to escape. Here, he seems to have this mystical ability to escape from anywhere at any time, and we don't even see how he does it. I think that kind of misses the point. Although the movie is made with craft and skill and it has fine performances, it doesn't have the focus and the power of the first one, and I agree with you, thumbs down.
It also doesn't have any of the terror of the first one. The first one was a really scary movie, and part of the reason was because they didn't show us that much violence. They showed us a lot of the aftermath, and it was more of a psychological thriller. This thing, you see it in graphic detail. There's not one moment in this movie which runs longer than 2 hours where I was ever scared or surprised. Yeah, you're disgusted. Well, so what? They can do disgusting in any kind of a movie. To have this caliber of a cast and Ridley Scott and all this money and all this anticipation and then to blow it on, well, we're just going to gross people out, to me is a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, you know, I read the book, and at the time when it first came out, everybody said, oh, they can't film this. And what amazed me was they could film that because the stuff in the book that you thought couldn't be filmed is filmed. And I'm sure that audiences, there are going to be big audiences for this movie.
Of course.
I'm sure they're going to laugh at some of the scenes that we've talked about because that's a way of dispelling your feeling of discomfort. Other people are going to hide their eyes. But whatever they do, it's basically just a geek show. It isn't this kind of elegant, stylish imagination about the mind of this Hannibal Lecter that made Silence of the Lambs so special. One footnote, an actor whose name I will not mention plays a person basically without a face in the movie and does a good job.
Yeah, he's terrific.
And I'm sure millions of people are going to go see Hannibal, and they're not going to see a bad movie, just one I think that is unsuccessful at doing what it wants to do.
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity, and it's really incredibly disgusting.
Black Hawk Down tells the true story of a catastrophic U.S. military operation in Somalia. It happened in 1993 and was part of a humanitarian mission to a country ravaged by starvation and civil unrest. U.S. troops include some young men who've never been in combat or on foreign soil before.
You ever shot at anybody before? No, Sergeant. Me neither.
More hard-bitten officers have seen what lies ahead.
Now, there will be some shooting. Bakara Market is the Wild West. But be careful what you shoot at because people do live there.
The plan was to capture 2 key lieutenants of a Somalian warlord and help clear the way for relief efforts. What was supposed to be a rapid sweep turned into the Battle of Mogadishu.
They're shooting at us! Colonel, they're shooting at us! We'll shoot back!
The warlord's soldiers took up arms and 2 Black Hawk helicopters were down. Trapped U.S. soldiers had their humanity and survival instincts put to the ultimate test. At home, the country became wary of risking American lives on foreign soil. The film shows the stark realities of each step of the ill-fated raid. The ensemble cast portrays not courage or heroics so much as the strife of the moment. Director Ridley Scott is a powerful Hollywood figure whose titles include movies like Blade Runner, Hannibal, and Gladiator. But I think Black Hawk Down is actually his best film. It's not a gung-ho war movie like Behind Enemy Lines where people are running around and shooting each other and we're supposed to be in the audience whooping and hollering. Instead, it's an incisive film about this military operation, of what went wrong and exactly how it went wrong. And he does a masterful job of showing where the troops are, what position they're in, what they can do, and what they can't do. It's really absorbing. I give Black Hawk Down 4 stars. I think it's
one of the year's best movies. And I'm Roger Ebert, ABC 7 News. Okay, the number 2 movie on my list is Black Hawk Down by Ridley Scott. And just from a logistical point of view, this is one of the best military movies ever made. Scott analyzes what went wrong and why in a disastrous U.S. raid in Somalia in 1993 when 18 U.S. troops were killed and support just couldn't get to them. William Fichtner and Ewan McGregor are among the soldiers who were in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong way.
You all right? You okay? Yeah. I can hear the bells ringing. Come on! Come on!
Black Hawk Down is about an operation that was confusing even while it was underway, and the brilliance of Ridley Scott's direction is that he makes that confusion clear to us. As we face possible ground combat not far from Somalia, this film is infinitely more timely and useful than an inane shootout like Behind Enemy Lines.
Well, Ridley Scott is an action genius. There's no disputing that. I mean, sometimes I don't want to know how things are done, but I can't wait for this thing someday to come out on DVD and see the inevitable making of feature. I can't even fathom how he was able to put together these amazing, amazing battle sequences.
And it all takes place within an area of several square blocks in Mogadishu, and which could easily have turned in the hands of another director into just a baffling maze. You don't, you know, people are just shooting at each other from out of corners or shadows, and you really understand it, and you see heartbreakingly how it goes wrong.
Amazing stuff.
Ever heard of a line? Hey, have you ever been dragged to the sidewalk and beat until you pissed blood?
Hello? Hello, I'm in the truck. I'm a police officer. The keys are over there. The keys are over there.
Robin Longstride, also known as Robin of the Hood.
For the crimes of incitement to cause unrest, I declare him to be an outlaw!
All who shelter him, their lives shall be taken on sight. Nail, please.
Men in tunics, arrows flying. It must be Robin Hood. I'm A.O. Scott of the New York Times.
And I'm Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune.
He's a merry medieval outlaw who's been played by Errol Flynn, Sean Connery, and Kevin Costner. He's been the subject of a Mel Brooks spoof and a Bugs Bunny cartoon. But the latest Robin Hood is a very serious guy. His real name is Robin Longstride, and he's played by Russell Crowe as a soldier on his way home from the Crusades. Here he pauses to storm a French castle in old-school action movie style. The director is Ridley Scott, and the story may remind you more than a little of Scott's Gladiator. Russell Crowe, once again, is an honest fighting man pushed to the limit by corrupt and cruel political authorities.
The laws of this land enslave people to its king. A king who demands loyalty but offers nothing in return.
The king's plan is to raise taxes and trample the rights of the people. The political scheming is punctuated by some romantic comedy banter when Robin shows up at the estate of Lady Marian, that's Cate Blanchett, pretending to be her deceased husband.
If the aim is deception, should you not be addressing me as my husband or my dear?
Don't be ridiculous. Well, are you coming or not?
Ask me nicely.
Please, dear husband, will you share my chamber?
Robin Hood ends with big battles and rousing speeches. It is a Ridley Scott movie, but by then, the bloated themes and overloaded plot have taken a lot of the fun out of the picture. But for the first hour or so, it is fun. Crowe has a little mischief behind all that glowering, and the movie has a grungy, leathery period feel. Some good fights and some broad, blustery, macho jokes. You could do worse, and if you don't expect too much, this is worth renting.
No, I think it's worth seeing. I think I had the opposite experience from in the first hour. You say the first hour worked for you,
yeah,
and then it started tailing?
And then as it starts coming together and the story is made clear and the themes are all knit together, that's when it started falling apart.
No, first 45 minutes, pure chaos. It's like one big, messy, completely disorienting action sequence, not even particularly well staged. Well, of course, you know, so you like disorientation. I think it's completely different by the time you get to an action sequence like this one from the climax. Now, this kind of spectacle, which is heavy on the CGI, as was Gladiator, may or may not be to your taste, but I think by the end of this picture, Ridley Scott's actually rediscovered at least how to put together a coherent action sequence, and by then, you're into the story. The first 45 minutes, what is even going on?
But by then, I've lost interest in the story because it's become so bombastic and so bloated and such a retread of Gladiator, actually.
You think so?
Down to just the villains and the way they behave and the whole revenge thing. And also, I think that giving this Robin Hood this backstory that this movie does, this is kind of a prequel in a way. He's not out there running around in green tights and a tunic, shooting arrows and stealing from the Sheriff of Nottingham. This is sort of how he became Robin and Marion the early years. And I just think that the history and the politics and the themes, it's all just too much. And some of that kind of grimy, grungy chaos that I really liked at the beginning is gone at the end.
No, I think once these two characters actually meet, then the story calms down. Scott knows how to focus the action, and we'll talk more about Ridley Scott's career, which is really kind of remarkably varied. If you look at, it's not just Gladiator. You look at Alien, to Thelma Louise, you know, a
Blade
very
Runner.
wide. Yes.
No, there's a lot to talk about.
We'll talk more about that in a bit.
There's no denying the man's skill.
No,
I just think that this is not the greatest application.
It's not great, but I put this as a solid hit like American Gangster.
Coming up next, he made Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, and Gladiator, among many others. We give our picks for the most over and underrated movies from director Ridley Scott.
I have only one more life to take. Take it now.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
That was a scene from Gladiator, the Best Picture Oscar-winning movie directed by Ridley Scott and starring Russell Crowe. We reviewed their new film Robin Hood earlier on this show, so in the over-under this week, we decided to name our picks for the most over and underrated movies directed by Mr. Ridley Scott. No relation.
No. Tony, a little soothsayer told me that you might think that, I don't know, the clip we just saw had something to do with your overrated feelings.
Yes, I am not entertained. Okay. Yeah, you know, Gladiator, I was a bit dismayed, frankly, when it won Best Picture when it did. I mean, it's, you know, it's again, I mean, Ridley Scott is a good craftsman. It's a well-made action movie. It's got, you know, a lot of story and a lot of characters. But just the mood to me was so heavy and glowering and angry and vengeful that I did not find it entertaining. I prefer, when it comes to swords and sandals and togas, I need a little more camp than Ridley Scott could bring to this.
Well, yes. I always need Spartacus, but not every film can be Spartacus like that. And I like that film better than that. I guess my overrated picture for Mr. Scott is Thelma and Louise, and it's not because it's not a good script, and I think the casting really is quite marvelous. I think Ridley Scott's training in commercials has sometimes gets him into trouble as a visual stylist. I think that film is pictorially kind of overblown and frankly just a little too fussy and beautiful and the kind of the wrong vibe for that story. I just wanted a lower budget, kind of grittier story.
So you feel like his approach, which is, yes, very big and very slick, doesn't quite work with
that one
material.
Yeah, with that one.
It's interesting because my pick for underrated Ridley Scott movie is a much sort of smaller, more character-based movie, and it's one that, frankly, I underrated when I reviewed it when it came out. It's Matchstick Men with Nicolas Cage, Sam Rockwell, Alison Lohman, a story about a con man played by Cage, who's wonderful, who meets a young woman who could be his estranged daughter, and it's a very tricky, clever movie, and it's nice actually in that case to see Scott not working on the kind of the big, epic, grand action movie scale, but with characters and interesting.
So
actors.
why didn't audiences find that, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know if it was the cast or the smartest. Sometimes small movies, even by big directors, have a hard time making their way. What is your pick for underrated?
in fact, Ridley Scott's first feature, The Duellists, 1979, did not, you know, had a hard time finding an audience. He shot that for $900,000. It's an adaptation of a Joseph Conrad story. It's got very peculiar casting in that you have American actors, Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine, both frankly struggling to kind of fit in with this largely British cast, with, you know, splendid cast of character actors, as these two characters in the Napoleonic era fight a series of grueling duels.
That is a good one.
It's a good picture.
People should check that out.
It's beautiful, but it's sort of the right size, and it's very different from Robin Hood.